Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today I'm going to be discussing 5 different Chris Kreider trades that can actually happen. Now the 2020 NHL trade deadline is almost here, and with Taylor Hall to the Arizona Coyotes, Chris Kreider right now is the biggest and best trade piece on the trade market, and likely will get a ton of interest too. But which teams will be pursuing Chris Kreider this trade deadline, and what trades could we possibly see? Watch till the end for all my mock trades and picks, and of course subscribe if you're new. But in today's video, I'll be discussing 5 different mock trades and 5 different NHL teams who I think are the most likely to go for Chris Kreider at this year's NHL trade deadline. Now, Kreider, the 2018 left winger, has had himself a pretty shaky and inconsistent year, but so far is 15 goals, 15 assists for 30 points in 45 games. And regardless of the offensive numbers, he currently being a rental, a UFA after this year with $4.6 million, is a guy who has that physical edge. And that is super valuable regardless of the offensive stats for a lot of playoff teams in the race right now. But getting us started here today with the first team that I think will be in on Chris Kreider at this deadline, maybe the least likely out of the 5 teams I'll mention here, but a team that I still think will be in the contention, that being the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now the Lightning will sit at $8.6 million in deadline cap space and will have a lot of flexibility for rentals, including guys like Chris Kreider. And I think a deal there will be very interesting. When it comes to New York, it's been confirmed that they want a young forward who's either close to or is NHL ready, alongside of a couple of picks, likely including a first-round pick for this 2020 draft. Tampa, I think, would love to give that up, and if they had the chance, I think we'll go for a guy like Kreider. Now for Tampa, it's good to note that they likely won't have to retain any salary on this deal. That's the opposite of a lot of teams in this list, so keep that in mind. But for the Tampa Bay Lightning, they'll have to go up in exchange for Chris Kreider, AHL forward Taylor Raddysh, a 2020 first-round pick, and a 2020 second-round pick. It is a pretty big cost because Taylor Raddysh is a very underrated prospect. He's been a very good point producer in the AHL in the past couple of years, still super young, but for New York, a team that wants that NHL-ready forward, that's a guy that Tampa will have to give up, on top of the 2 very solid picks and a very loaded draft. I think Tampa in this situation, I would not be surprised they're hesitant, and I think they should be, but at that point, if you want to get the best player at the trade deadline, that's the kind of stuff you have to give up. But for Tampa, who has made those trade deadline moves in the past, there is obviously a lot of risk and reward here. For a guy like Chris Kreider, who has a ton of playoff experience, could end up helping Tampa in the best way possible for a potential cup run if Tampa decides to wake up and actually get the thing done. But that's a guy that would really help them. He might not have a spot in that top 6 with how loaded their top 6 is right now, and he might be a third-line forward, but if you have the chance to get a guy like that who can improve your team in so many ways, I think Tampa might just go for it. And again, continuing the trend of Tampa Bay and New York just exchanging players, it might as well continue for another year. But now going into the second Chris Kreider trade that can actually happen. I'm now going to go onto the Calgary Flames and the possibility of them acquiring Chris Kreider. Now, for the Calgary Flames, they'll have $3.7 million in deadline cap space. And if Calgary were to retain, or if New York were able to retain 50%, that would be well enough able to get Chris Kreider on that team. And for the Calgary Flames, who have now found themselves on a very good hot streak, yes, that pun was intended, that's a team that could use that next physical edge. They already have Milan Lucic, I know, but for a team like that, some extra offense, some extra grit, Chris Kreider does bring it all. And for a team like Calgary, who was embarrassed in last year's playoffs, I think a guy like Chris Kreider would be that extra jump that they might just need. Now for the New York Rangers, again, they want young forwards who can come up and play well, and Calgary definitely does have a surplus of that. I think the big trade piece going back to the New York Rangers would be Dylan Dubé, and you also have a 2022nd and a 2023rd coming back. But again, this is also on New York's part retaining 50% too, so that extra adds to value also as well, especially if Calgary wants to make some other trade deadline moves. But to me, if Calgary were to give up a guy like Dylan Dubé somehow in this trade, I think there's almost no chance that New York gets a first-round pick also on top of that. Dylan Dubé is a guy who I think is a little bit overrated as a prospect, but I still think will be a great player in the NHL someday. But he has a lot of value towards his name, especially with the Calgary Flames. That will not be an easy prospect to get off their books, and for New York, they likely will have to sacrifice a first-round selection to be able to get a guy like that. But now moving on to the third Chris Kreider trade that can actually happen. I'm now going to go to the third team, one of the most likely teams to get Kreider, that being the Colorado Avalanche. Now the Avalanche, in their current cap space and their deadline cap space, will have $31 million to work with. That's a lot of money, and Chris Kreider, I don't think it'll have any problem of going to Colorado if needs be. For a team like Colorado, we've already seen confirmed interest in Kreider. Elliotte Friedman already reporting that multiple times. But for a team like Colorado who needs that extra depth, as a third or second line guy, I think Chris Kreider is a perfect fit on Colorado. Not just on offense, but with everything he brings. But just like a team like Calgary, Colorado is a team that has a bunch of options. They have a bunch of young guys, whether they be NHL established or in the minors, that could be very solid adds for the Rangers. But going into my mock trade, for the New York Rangers, coming back to them, I have Tyson Jost, Igor Shishkov, and a 2020 first round pick. Now, Tyson Jost, I know, is a huge thing there, and I'm not sure Colorado wants to give up on him that early. But he hasn't had the best season whatsoever, and that's a guy who I think New York could definitely use. As a center, he's a guy that could slot in, potentially as a third line guy behind Strome and behind Zibanejad. And he also has Shishkov, who's had a pretty solid season with the Colorado Eagles of the AHL. He's a guy that could develop into a solid third liner someday. And you also have the 2020 first round pick, which for a lot of these teams is something they're going to have to give up. But let's be honest, for Colorado, even if they don't go after Chris Kreider, they're going to go after somebody, whether it be like a Tyler Toffoli on the market or something. The Colorado Avalanche are going to be active, but we've already seen confirmed interest for Colorado on Chris Kreider, and to me that's the most likely thing at this point for them. That situation where even if they don't land their top dog, I think they're going to be active when it comes to acquiring depth on both D and offense, so whether they get Chris Kreider or not, expect the Colorado Avalanche to make some moves and to move some picks and prospects. And now on to the fourth team and the fourth Chris Kreider trade that I think can actually happen, now going into the Boston Bruins and their interest in Chris Kreider. Now, just like the Colorado Avalanche, the Boston Bruins have been confirmed by Elliotte Friedman to have serious interest in Chris Kreider. Now, that team right now, I don't even know what to think of Brad Marchand skating over the puck in the shootout. That team needs a little bit of tinkering, but I think a guy like Chris Kreider is like a perfect Boston Bruin. Like, if there's any player, especially this trade deadline, who would automatically fit in Boston, it's Chris Kreider. I mean, come on. And I mean, just looking at his face, you know he's a Boston boy. He was born in Boxford, Massachusetts. He likely grew up as a Bruins fan, so I'm just saying, I'm just putting that out there. But for Chris Kreider, it might take a little bit of tinkering to get that deal done. Right now, the Boston Bruins will sit at $1.7 million in cap space heading into the trade deadline. Not too much to work with, and they will have to add some cap onto that deal to make it work. But going back to the New York Rangers, it will include Brett Ritchie, a 2020 first round pick, and forward prospect Jack Studnicka. Now, Studnicka is a very solid prospect, and I wouldn't be surprised if Boston almost needs to hold on to him because he's been straight brilliant in the AHL this season with Providence. But that's a thing that I think Boston will have to give up. A great pick in that first rounder, a great prospect, and some cap coming back. I don't think Brett Ritchie is really a part of that deal too much, but he has $1 million to his name, and going back to New York would be enough to get that deal done. But for a team like Boston, who wants to get revenge for last year's Cup final run, they could get the best piece in the market, could get the hometown boy, and right now, that guy's name is Chris Kreider. Now, on to the moment you have been waiting for. My fifth team and my fifth Chris Kreider trade that I think can actually happen. Now on to a team that nobody expected to be on this list. Nobody could have ever foreseen this. Yeah, I think the St. Louis Blues are the best bet to get Kreider. There, I said it. I know it's the hottest take of all of them. It's crazy. I know. But I think the St. Louis Blues right now, if I had to bet on anybody, I think they will be the team that ends up getting Chris Kreider at this deadline. Now, currently they sit at $4.9 million in deadline space, which is well more than enough to get Chris Kreider at this point without even any salary retained if they want to do that. But for a team like St. Louis, with Vladimir Tarasenko and LTAR, adding another winger into that group, I just think makes way too much sense. Right now they have the cap space and they have the prospects to do it. Now, going back to the New York Rangers in this deal, I see Jordan Kyrou being the main piece alongside a 2020 first round pick and a 2020 third round pick. Again, Jordan Kyrou being the main prospect there. I think that's a guy that New York would love to have. He's a guy that's pretty much borderline on the AHL to NHL scale, and right now is pretty much playing full-time with the Blues. He hasn't been super productive, but for a team like New York who can always use young talent, that's a guy that I think would slot in pretty well. Again, it's another center, likely could be the third center right out of the gate and could get some good power play time. And you also have the first round pick, which I think is almost mandatory unless you're the Calgary Flames, and then you have another pick on top of that. There's a couple of prospects who could maybe be in here, but I think New York would honestly settle for Kyrou and a couple of picks. I think that's a solid deal that helps both teams. St. Louis trying to get that second cup, and for New York getting solid talent already and solid talent in the future with those two picks involved. But for Chris Kreider, honestly, there's going to be a ton of teams in the market for him this year. Even without the 5 teams I mentioned, there's teams like Pittsburgh that could be in on him somehow. I don't even know how it's possible, but I guess some things happen. There's a lot of teams out there that will love to have him for a playoff run and would love to add him. It all just comes down to cap space, what teams are willing to give, and which teams honestly have solid NHL-ready forwards willing to give up. Right now, that's what New York is looking for, that solid young prospect and a first round pick at the very least. But of course, with this trade video, I need to hear y'all's thoughts down those comments down below. Let me know what you think about my 5 mock trades for Chris Kreider. What do you agree and disagree with? And of course, let me know your thoughts down those comments down below. Where do you think Chris Kreider will end up? And what do you see going back to New York? But if y'all want some more Grav videos just like this one, I would suggest you click on this card right here to watch my full playlist of all my trade rumor videos right in one place. But of course, with this video, thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. Make sure y'all do so. Comment down below your thoughts on my mock trades, what you agree and disagree with. Of course, share this video with your friends. Get the mock trade goodness out there, boys. My name is Nathan, and I'll see you on the next video or stream. Goodbye.